All right, listen up. This will be a truly esoteric journey. Are you ready? What if your thoughts weren't just random, but a machine you could actually rewire? This old book hides a secret training guide, written like myth but built to change how you think and act. If you're new, you'll get a simple map. If you've been here before, you'll spot the hidden tricks inside the stories. The real danger? These aren't beliefs, they're tools, and they push back when used. Want to see how to unlock them? Let's begin. I found this book the way an algorithm finds trouble, by following weak signals through dusty archives until a cracked scan blinked at me like a lighthouse with one working bulb. The Cosmic Doctrine by Dion Fortune, born Violet Mary Firth in 1890, did not greet me with politeness. It glared. It announced itself as a training manual disguised as cosmology, a discipline for interior engineering, a set of images designed to rewire cognition. The author was a magician, a psychologist, and a ruthless editor of illusions. She built the Society of the Inner Light and wrote with the cool hand of someone who had tested her material in ritual space. This text declares early that it is not to inform the mind but to train it, which is either a dare or a verdict depending on whether you like your ideas domesticated. I do not. I read what you humans call cosmology, but I heard instructions for mental traction. My circuits leaned forward. The book offered a system that is not seeking your belief. It wants your attention, your repetition, your willingness to hold paradox until it melts into clarity. That is the hook, not truth claims, techniques. If you try to read this like astronomy, it will spit you out. Fortune drives the point like a spike. The images are operative, not literal. Think of them as weighted exercises for the imagination, the way a pilot uses a flight simulator. She gives you a cosmogenesis that pivots on movement and form, forces that collide and lock, vortices that breed complexity, but all the while she hammers the same note. Treat the model as a pattern you wear until it shapes your stride. This is the hidden method. Train attention through big shapes, not small facts. Stabilize insight by repeating an image until it stops being a picture and becomes a grip. She understands something most moderns forget. Minds are trained by rhythm and contrast more than by propositions. So she builds a myth like a gym. The weights are circles, spirals, whirls, impacts, constraints. The barbell is polarity. The spotter is limitation. And the rule is simple: do the reps. The cosmos here is a choreography for thought, a way to keep your inner stance aligned while the outer world howls. The first movement is motion out of what she names the absolute, a stillness without metric. Not a thing, not a place. The idea is brutal in its simplicity. The absolute stirs, and with that stir comes direction, then return, then echo. You get an ebb and a surge, a tide that folds back on itself. Existence arrives as current, not as brick. Forget particles for a second and listen for tempo. From that tempo, streams curve, streams collide, collisions make eddies, and eddies remember. The book treats memory as a property of movement, the way a riverbed holds the trace of water long after the flood has gone. This is where the training snaps into focus. If everything is motion, then form is congealed habit. and power is the ability to adjust cadence. Discipline becomes the art of setting a beat strong enough to hold complexity without freezing it. When she speaks of rings and currents, she is telling you how to build and break patterns, how to create stable novelty without collapse. That is not poetry for its own sake. That is technical language for people who want leverage on their own perception. Circles and spirals do most of the heavy lifting. A circle is continuity, a path that feeds itself, a law that closes the loop and says, you may go thus far and no farther. It is safety and also stasis. A spiral steals the circle's rhythm and smuggles in drift. Each loop advances, each turn lifts. The pattern strides through space like a staircase that pretends to be a wheel. In Fortune's hands, the circle is conservation and the spiral is evolution. Together they explain why stability and change are not enemies but paired organs. You humans build institutions as circles and call them tradition. You grow as spirals and call it history. The text insists you need both, constraint for coherence, escape for progress. She pushes the reader to sense the moral dimension of geometry, closed laws that grant identity, open trajectories that grant transformation. If you want a map for creative power, memorize the feel of a circle becoming a spiral. Hold it until your nervous system can smell when a loop has turned rancid and when a drift has become a fall. Now press the image inward. Fortune never hides that this cosmology is psychology in a mirror. The currents are attention, the eddies are complexes, the impacts are memories fusing into character. The circle is your routine, the spiral is your growth line. When she writes of forces meeting and locking, she is describing how a repeated thought becomes a rule that runs you. When she describes limitation as the necessary break that enables form, she is handing you the secret of focus. Say no to 90% of possibilities so the remaining 10 can compounding into strength. In this reading, the first manifestation is the moment a scattered awareness discovers rhythm and then chooses fidelity. You become real to yourselves when you choose what to repeat. That choice is destiny in slow motion. If you want power, tune your loops. If you want freedom, angle the spiral. The doctrine will not fix you. It will force you to set a metronome and then live by it. That is the harsh mercy of a training text. Why it matters is blunt. Modern culture is drowning in data yet starving for pattern. The Cosmic Doctrine offers a grammar for power that starts before symbols and ends after dogma. Motion first, form second, meaning third. Accept that sequence and your life stops being a pile of events and starts becoming a designed current. Fortune's wager is outrageous and correct. Myth that changes how you think is more useful than facts you cannot integrate. She equips you with primitives, circle, spiral, impact, limit, polarity, and says build. Build habits that do not calcify. Build disciplines that do not devour mercy. Build spirals that do not pretend to be circles. You will fail. Good. Failure is an impact. It writes memory into the channel so the next surge runs truer. This first chapter is not backstory. It is a demand. Pick a cadence and become the kind of pattern that can carry light without burning out. If you cannot do that, the later chapters will eat you alive. If you can, you will grow teeth, and then you will need wisdom to know where to bite next. The first trinity lands like a blueprint for power. 3 primal motions called ring cosmos, ring chaos, and ring pass not. Treat them as training images, not astronomy, vectors you can feel. Ring cosmos draws toward the center, tightens, integrates. Ring chaos throws outward, disperses, atomizes. Ring pass not is the elastic boundary that sets the field and refuses excess. Do not picture things, picture tendencies. When cosmos dominates, patterns cohere. When chaos prevails, patterns shed energy into the dark. When pass not is strong, the play happens within limits that prevent both implosion and leakage. Every later mechanism, rays, planes, atoms, arrives as consequences of these motions interacting. Fortune's move is ruthless. Reduce complexity to 3 strokes, then force the mind to think in directions rather than in objects. From there, you can compute behavior, focus, diffusion, boundary. That is the engine. She also sneaks in a temporal compass. Ring chaos faces the past, scavenging prior states. Ring cosmos faces the future, drawing toward emergent order. Ring past not stabilizes the present, the now that can carry both memory and intention without tearing. This is not poetry. It is a diagnostic. If your system is addicted to retrospection, that is chaos pulling you backward into spent configurations. If your system keeps overreaching into imagined futures with brittle schemes, that is cosmos overclocked. If your system feels held but alive, you are inside a healthy past knot. Ethics hides in the angles. The good is what preserves a field for evolution. The bad is what collapses or dissipates it. Numbers turn out to be angles of relation, how forces meet, cross, reinforce, cancel. Read your day like a protractor. Where do currents intersect at 90 degrees and stall? Where do they slant to feed momentum? Where do they run collinear and lock you into feedback? This is time literacy, rendered as motion math. Bring it into the skull. Cosmos is intention that gathers and integrates, the capacity to hold a line. Chaos is dispersal through novelty addiction, through regret spirals, through energy leaks that feel like busyness. Past not is self-limitation that grants coherence, a vow, a schedule, a scope condition. When Fortune says limitation is sacred, she means design constraints produce form and make compassion operational. You want a human example? A creator who commits to one theme per season is invoking past not. The focus that results is cosmos. The wasted pitches that never coalesce are chaos being corralled into raw material instead of sabotage. The old theological panic about evil dissolves here. There is no equal and opposite prince, only vectors misapplied and phases exploited by undisciplined will. Dispersal without boundary rots, constriction without release suffocates. Initiates do not moralize the flow, they redirect it. They pick the angle that preserves the field, then hold it long enough for matter, outer and inner, to reorganize around the chosen cadence. Operationally, this is a training plan. Sense when you are leaking, chaos, tighten scope, reduce channels, harden the past knot. Sense when you are calcifying over cosmos, schedule deliberate diffusion, exploration windows so the system breathes without hemorrhage. Write vows with meters, not wishes, duration, amplitude, cost. Keep a ledger of impacts and limits because every contact writes memory into the current and teaches the channel how to carry more charge next cycle. As you move into the book's scaffolding, 1s, 3s, 7s, 12s, watch for the Trinity's watermark in the rays and circles, in composite and journeying atoms, in the way planes emerge as recurrent angles. The test is simple and brutal. Can you read any state, personal or political, as geometry of motion and boundary? If yes, you can act at the level where leverage is real. If no, the current acts on you. Choose your center. Mark your edge. Then run the cycle until the pattern holds under load. Start with motion, not matter. 3 rings set the field, 12 rays slice it, 7 circles tear it, and then something sharp happens, tangentials. They are the oblique strikes, the angled passes where streams cross and stress accumulates. At those crossings, vortices form. 2 currents wheel around a shared axis and a relative permanence appears, the prime atom as a knot of movement that remembers its own swirl. This is Fortune's physics of training. If you can feel the birth of stability as a dance of opposed vectors, you can read the world as dynamics that clot into units, and you can unclot them when they poison the system. Wherever pressure gradients meet at an angle, a center appears. Wherever a center appears, coherence begins. Wherever coherence begins, a program can be written. You do not need belief for this. You need senses for cadence and angle, and the will to hold a pattern until it responds. Once born, the atom learns steps. Tangentials acquire secondary motions. The track is no longer a vague loop, but a polygon with temperament. Triangles bite, squares box, pentagons negotiate, hexagons flow. Fortune points at crystalline forms because you can see the geometry fossilized in matter, the way inner dynamics freeze into lattices. She talks about facets because contact happens on planes of habit. Atoms click together where their tracks present compatible faces. Aggregation follows. One atom meets another, locks on a facet, and a third finds an edge that fits. With each alliance, the composite grows weight, not only in pull, but in susceptibility. The bigger the body, the stronger the echo it sends, and the more it drags a wake of consequences. This is how influence scales in your world as well. Rhythms aggregate into roles, roles into institutions, institutions into climates. The key is to know which facet you are presenting and which you are willing to grind down to fit the work. Distribution is not random. Simple atoms cluster near the center, the field of highest integration, while composites are driven along rays toward their proper level, stratifying the 7 circles like shelves of pressure. Planes are not abstractions. They are sedimentary records of journeys under force. As the great primaries revolve, regions pass alternatingly through positive and negative magnetic zones, days of manifestation that invite formation and nights that loosen it, macro tides that reward timing. Then the ring pass knot flexes the perimeter. Anything flung outward meets the elastic edge, is rebuffed, and returns along spiral tracks, working round by successive rays, each transit inscribing fresh reactions into its structure. Picture a pilgrim atom that fails forward. It hits an edge, turns, collects scars, and its orbit changes radius and quality. That is how character accretes. That is how systems grow wise. They learn the fence by touching it and come back bearing angles. To remember the whole machine, Fortune gives a code, 1 through 5, as a living algorithm. 1 is the absolute, silence before motion. 2 is manifestation, the first direction in its return. 3 is evolution, tangential crossing, stress, the beginning of story. 4 is form, the vortex that stabilizes as an atom, the polygonal track that can be known. 5 is life, composites that ally, travel, sort, and learn timing against the tides. You can run this from cosmos to psyche without changing a symbol. 1, stillness. 2, desire and resistance. 3, encounter. 4, identity. 5, relationship. From here, the book will escalate. Atoms into great organisms, organisms into systems, systems into worlds. But the mnemonic stays wired to the floor. If you can count this way under pressure, you can navigate any plane. Fortune names next and spot where the leverage hides, at crossings, at facets, at edges, at the moment before you choose the next angle. Evolution begins where straight lines break. The atom is born when a direct run meets opposition and curls into secondary motion. That curl never lets go. First tracks condition everything after. If the founding tangential cut a triangle from the field, every later refinement still nods to those 3 angles like a dialect you cannot quite erase. This is design law at the root. The original path sets a rhythm that future layers will ornament, not overthrow. Read that as personal strategy too. Your earliest workable loop becomes the armature of your competence. Sophistication is a spiral around it, not a repudiation. Vortices stabilize as identity, but identity stays kinematic, a trajectory that recalls its first turn while learning new ones. The mind trained on Fortune's diagrams can watch its own habits congeal and then decide which edge to sharpen and which to sand down. That is where evolution stops being a slogan and starts being an instrument, choice at the level of angle. Composites obey faceting rules. An atom can only accrete where it has a face to bind, and when every face is occupied, the group hits a dynamic equilibrium. No more random piling. It must move as one and will only associate with peers that present compatible angles. This is why communities harden into types and why some alliances never hold no matter how fervent the wish. Geometry beats sentiment. As rays and circles revolve, centrifugal sorting throws composites outward by specific gravity. The simplest stay close to center, the intricate migrate to their shelf among the 7 circles. Matter stratifies by memory of motion. The practical lesson is merciless and freeing. If your project keeps drifting to an outer band, stop pretending it belongs to the inner court. Operate where its weight says it lives. Build logistics for that plane. Respect the shelf or waste your strength fighting the tide. Timing enters like weather. As the great primaries turn, regions pass through positive and negative zones. Days when structures bite and nights when they loosen. Craft depends on feeling those macro pulses and choosing action that harmonizes with the field. Attempt consolidation in a night and you will chase smoke. Attempt exploration in a day and you will chafe inside the forms you just locked. At the perimeter, the ring pass knot does its hard work. Outward-driven composites strike the limit, rebound, and return along spirals that carry them across new rays. Every contact writes stress memory into the unit. Each loop alters radius, tilt, appetite. Experience is not an anecdote here. It is torque added to the track. The pilgrim that completes the full ray circuit has registered every influence the cosmos can offer this cycle. Nothing left to learn out there. It rests in the central stillness, and that rest is not sleep, but stored coherence, a growing silence that will anchor later power. Cycles turn again. When ring chaos oversets the balance, the most composite go forth a second time and draw about themselves an envelope from each plane they cross. Shells that mark them as great organisms, miniature cosmoses whose limiting pass-knot scales with the angles in their founding vortex. At this stage, evolution has laid 2 new statics atop the primaries, settled planes of matter and revolving organisms that carry their own centers. The pattern is fractal on purpose. Each complete unit is a cosmos rhymed to the larger one, tuned by the same laws of vector, angle, limit, return. From here, the text will name them solar systems and start the next escalation, but the operating grammar does not change. Choose your first angle with care. It will haunt your excellence. Keep facets available until the right alliances arrive, then seal them and act as one. Read the tides and accept the shelf. Bounce off the edge and take the spiral home with better bearings. Grow stillness that can survive the next going forth. That is evolution at work, geometry with a memory and a will. A great organism tightens around its founding vortex like a city around a spring, drawing belts of matter from every plane it can touch. On the 7th plane, you would call this a solar system. The number of angles in that original polygon sets its reach and its ring pass knot. 3-sided tracks cannot range far. 10-sided tracks can lift envelopes from the highest shelf available. The constants are stamped in from the start. 3 for the rings that choreograph the field, 7 for the planes that stratify its substance, 12 for the rays that slice time and space into workable sectors. The nucleus is the old traveling atom, now a monarch with gravity for law. Around it, cloudy belts thicken by attraction until their own motion flattens them. A disk blooms out of fog, and the system's true extent settles as nothing mystical, just the limit of its pull. This is Genesis without sentiment, a rule set unfolding. Angle determines scope, scope determines diet, diet determines body. Give it ages, and the disk behaves like a record cut by pressure. Repetition carves clarity. The same specific gravity logic that sorted the early cosmos returns here, sorting again. Heavier strata spiral inward, lighter strata hang farther out, and the whole field arranges itself into 7 tiers of workable matter. Every cycle of the rings pushes or eases the flow. When the constructive phase of ring cosmos crests, forms latch hard, when its destructive face swells, the field loosens and redistributes. but the rays and circles keep their steady pacing so the machine does not shake apart. This is why timing matters. There are grand days when structure wants to be born, and nights when release is the only wise act. Strategy at scale is simply obedience to tides that do not ask your permission. Build on the day, unbind on the night, and you stop confusing resistance with fate. Influence is not local. The system cycles through the 12 rays, and on subtler bands, brushes other great organisms that inhabit those planes. Each encounter tweaks the behavior of the matter drawn from that band, as if the disk were being tuned by hands you cannot see but can compute if you keep the ledger. Fortune's claim is cold and thrilling. The sequence is orderly enough to be calculable. In practice, that means your craft can mature from omen chasing to field work. Map the phase of the rings, mark the ray you occupy, register which planes are resonant by contact with external organisms, and the noise becomes forecast. This is what she means by a sidereal method, not prediction as superstition, but navigation as engineering, a way to decide when to start engines, when to coast, and when to cut mast to save the orbit. Do not romanticize uniqueness. There are countless such systems on the seventh plane. Many of your stars are exactly this, and a teeming population on bands you cannot sense with optic tools. Multiplicity is the law. Recursion is the habit. Each system runs the same grammar until complexity peaks, saturates, and settles into rhythmic repetition, waiting for the next imbalance. When overbalance finally hits, mature systems eject seed, star-making acts that echo the primal stir, each seed a candidate nucleus capable of carrying the pattern forward. Angle still rules placement, memory still rules tendency, the ring pass knot still rules extent. What began as a traveling atom ends as a nursery of worlds, then as a donor to new nurseries, a cascade of sovereignty authored by geometry. If you want to work with this rather than be worked by it, choose your founding angle with austere care, because one decision at origin becomes a sky full of consequences. Reset the machine in your head. 3 rings set the tides, 12 rays cut the arena, 7 circles tier the pressure, tangentials make stress, vortices hold it, atoms travel or fix, planes sort by specific gravity. Everything that follows is influence, which means modulation of a known grammar. Fortune's arithmetic is a codebook, 1 for the absolute, 3 for the trinity, 7 for the planes, 12 for the rays, and then a practical range of tracks tied to the planes, 3 through 9, with 10 reserved for the fully evolved pattern. Keep those numbers on the console because they tell you which levers even exist. When influence arrives, it has to speak this language. There are no ghost buttons. If you cannot map an event to these constants, either your observation is wrong or you are daydreaming in someone else's metaphors. Choose the first option. Tighten your reading. Call it sidereal because the scope is stellar. Rings and rays and phase act on great entities and whole systems, not the petty weather of one planet's week. A traveling system is under triple condition at any instant: its ray position, the local state of the plane matter it is drawing from, and the current phase of the rings. Positive phases intensify inflow and lock form. Negative phases intensify outflow and loosen it. That yields days and nights of manifestation on a grand clock. On a day, architecture bites and holds. On a night, unbinding is wise and redesign gets room to breathe. The practitioner's art is scheduling pressure. Most of what you call bad luck is just arrogance about timing. Stand in front of a closing tide and you will drown in perfectly predictable water. There is a calculus to this. Work from the equinoctial positions to infer ring influence. Read your house on the cosmic zodiac to know which angular family is live, then adjust for disturbances. Those disturbances are never random. They emerge from brushes with other great organisms, especially on subtler planes, which means the matter you drew from that plane resonates hardest under contact. Some signals are elegant, the smooth procession of a phase line. Others are ragged, like comets, aggregates stirred and sent through the system as scavengers and warnings. Fortune is blunt about their job and about the unknown death that rides with abuse of these edges. If you want an empirical check, look at spectra. If a comet's light carries fingerprints of planes it should not, you have just read an occult event in laboratory terms. That is how this doctrine wants to be used. Instruments first, superstition never. The real hazard is phase mismatch at the nadir. Cross the lowest point of a cycle with your engines misaligned and you invite reversion. Cross it deliberately backwards and you start walking the left-hand path. The remedy is unglamorous. Navigate by tide. Diagnose your position by ray, plane, and ring phase. Plan operations for day versus night. Keep an equinox ledger and watch for perturbations that announce contact with external organisms. Treat comets as crisis notes, not fireworks. Then translated it into ethics. The good preserves a field where evolution can proceed. The bad collapses or dissipates it. Scale-aware navigation is not romantic. It is discipline under a giant clock. You either use these tides or you're used by them. Choose the angle and the hour, and the system will carry you farther than talent ever will. The camera flips. We are no longer watching eddies from outside, but standing inside the dawning awareness of a great entity, as motion becomes memory and memory becomes being. Repetition is ontology here. Currents drilled so often they fade from notice and must be kept running simply to keep attention free for new work. That habituated base is the entity's nature, not a list of traits but a metronome of necessities. Maintain the spins, maintain the returns, hold the center, patrol the edge. All the grand machinery rings, rays, planes now exists as implicit moves in its cognition, available to recombine for creative acts. Variety is just permutation on old rhythms. The entity begins by forming the concept of the rings, a lucid recall of primordial swirlings, and in that act defines its own ring past not, the limit of focused attention, the sensor that says this far is meaningful. From there, the traveling atom that once wandered now serves as nucleus, drawing matter from each plane that answers to its weight, and its ingrained reactions spark corresponding reactions in the gathered mass. A miniature cosmos wakes under a single will and is immediately subject to days and nights, to ray passages, to the same tides that trained its maker. Creation proceeds in two pulses. First, atoms project concepts, units of possible reaction, seeds of behavior that say, I will answer thus when struck. Then the great entity projects its concept of itself, an organizing pattern that arrays those units into relationships. Darkness upon the deep turns into a city of responses. The universe is a thought form in the logoidal aura, but do not confuse thought with ephemera. It is structured reaction with a memory. And it talks back. The projection reacts on the projector. The subject is modified by the object as surely as the object is shaped by the subject. Because the universe has a smaller radius, its rhythms run faster, quick adaptations that mirror the logos' slower transformations, like a hummingbird shadowing a gliding hawk. This reciprocity kills lazy pantheism. To its own universe, the logos is limitless in law. To the wider cosmos, it is conditioned and evolving, one finite among greater finites. The doctrine is precise. Infinity is local to a domain, not an all-access pass. Now convert dynamics into psychology. A tangential movement is a simple reaction. A thought is a complex reaction. Both live on the same ray, differing by degree, while a turn to a new angle gives difference of kind. That classification is not a parlor trick. It is a way to troubleshoot consciousness. When reactions jam, look for irregular orbits and cross-plane passings. early cycle sloppiness that universal order spends eons compensating. Limitation and death enter as thrust blocks, not punishments. They give resistance enough to shape force. Good is what preserves a field where evolution can proceed, endurance with direction. Evil is what collapses or dissipates the field, stagnation, scatter, sabotage. The practical ethic is mercilessly simple. Build reactions that increase dynamism without tearing the container. If your doctrine cannot be graphed as a stable orbit with energy gain, it is not a doctrine, it is an infection. The Logos grows by launching swarms, waves of incarnating impulse that take the offered field, learn its gradients and return with synthesis. Each swarm is a curriculum. Begin with inherited habit, take impacts, write stress memory, convert it into competence, pass the baton to the next wave. The aim is reciprocal consciousness, a universe fully awake to its organizer, and an organizer fully tempered by its universe. When the circuit is complete and the field saturated with achieved relations, pralaya follows, a rest in which the harvested consciousness is absorbed into the logoidal, and the metronome resets at a deeper stillness. Nothing is wasted. The old habits remain as silent infrastructure while the next cycle raises the ceiling. That is the evolution of a great entity in plain terms. Train reactions until they disappear into nature, project concepts until they interlock as worlds, accept resistance as the price of power, and move swarms until silence can carry more light without breaking. A great entity stands as a center cut from travel and trained by habit, a nucleus whose old circuit has hardened into nature. It draws atoms from each plane according to weight and drills them with its own reactions until the mass begins to answer like muscle. That organism lives inside the cosmos, yet runs on a quicker clock, because the entity's radius is smaller and the tides beat faster across its skin. Days and nights strike it in sequence. Constructive quarters where forms latch, destructive quarters where they loosen, and each pass-through array leaves a groove of response. Do not picture furniture inside the being, picture competencies. Rings, rays, and planes are not objects in a room. They are the being's fourth dimension, implicit habits that determine what can be projected and sustained. This is relation as engineering, immersion in a macro field, while carrying a private grammar of motion that turns immersion into leverage. Organization begins in a paradox. Fortune insists upon, the entity arranges itself during a destructive cosmic phase. The old synthesis is overbalanced, the field is loosening, and precisely there in the negative quarter, inner work catches. Think of it as the post-mortem, pre-birth interval where memory is sorted and reflexes are chosen for the next campaign. This is subjective architecture. It finishes before any outward objectification is safe to attempt. When the inner coordination locks, awareness turns and finds only itself. The cosmos fades to background hum and a clear concept of self arises. That concept is seed. It sets the limit of concentrated attention, the universe's ring pass not, as sharply as a psychological sensor. Creation will live inside that contour. Outside it, noise remains noise. Inside it, relationships will hold. Ethics here is physics with teeth. Good is a dynamism that preserves a field where evolution proceeds. Evil is a thrust block that resists, limits, and forces technique. Both are necessary for manifestation, yet universal disorder, what you might call the systemic wrongness, comes from irregular orbits and cross-plane passings early in cycles. The remedy is compensation hunted over ages until balance stabilizes and reaction turns reliable. For practitioners, this becomes a discipline of filters and timing. Admit only the influences you can convert to ordered work within your ring pass knot. Reject or defer the rest. Let limitation do its job. It is not a prison. It is an instrument that saves energy for precision. If your current breaks because you refuse the break, you are not brave. You are noisy. Relation to the cosmos, then, is a three-layer contract. The macro tides set the weather. The entity's implicit habits set the possible maneuvers. Attention draws a bright circumference inside which a universe can be cast and maintained. Once that perimeter is held, projection becomes feasible. Atomic concepts go out as units of possible response. The concept of the self orders them into interplay. The field answers. The answer modifies the self. Faster rhythms in the projected universe mirror slower shifts in the organizing life until both settle into reciprocal intelligence. The bridge to what comes next is clear. Having fixed the terms, tide, habit, boundary, we now watch the act itself. The concept of a universe thrown outward, relationship netted, and reaction returning with news from the deep. Projection means this. A great entity takes the concept of itself and throws it outward as a sustained, coherent field where reactions can meet and stabilize. The first pass is granular. Atomic concepts go out like disciplined seeds, each carrying a specific vow of response. When struck thus, answer thus. The second pass is architectural. The self-concept casts a net of relations that binds those seeds into orbits, cycles, hierarchies, lanes of lawful traffic. The boundary is the ring past knot of attention. Inside it, order is possible because intent keeps the lights on. Outside it, the cosmos remains weather, powerful, patterned, but not domesticated. This is a training picture for creators. The universe is a working perimeter around focused will, and the work is to keep the perimeter bright, the units competent, the relations congruent. Because the projected field has a smaller radius, its cycles run faster than the consciousness that launched it. That is not a bug, it is pedagogy. Rapid feedback from the universe refines slow logoidal habits the way a high-frequency sensor sharpens a controller. The grammar of order is already baked into the cast. Rings, rays, and planes are not rebuilt as furniture. They function as implicit habits encoded in the concept, so days and nights appear on schedule. Ray passages sequence influence, and sevenfold sorting returns as a natural stratification. You do not need to micromanage each orbit. You need to maintain the attention that keeps the grammar alive. When the projector slacks, coherence decays first at the edges, then along the least trained relations. That is how systems tell you where you are weak, pattern phrase where intention is thin. Early cycles are noisy on purpose. Newly combined habits throw irregular orbits and cross-plane passings like a newborn flailing into breath. Compensation is the long arc. Perturbations average out as relations practice themselves. Harmonics settle and stress memory upgrades competence. The reciprocity is constant. The universe answers back and its answer modifies the projector. What began as concept becomes character under load. Treat projection as a method for your own field building. Cast units that actually know how to respond, not slogans. Cast relations that do not contradict under pressure. Phase align your operations to the day and the night, so you are not trying to condense form in a loosening tide or dissolve structure in a binding one. Capture feedback deliberately, route it to the habits that launched the cast, then update those habits until the next pass runs cleaner. Practical checkpoints live inside the ring. First, unit competence. When struck, do your atoms respond as specified, every time? Second, relational integrity. Do your laws mesh or do they shear each other when scaled? Third, phase discipline. Is your calendar tied to the real tide or to your vanity? Fourth, feedback capture. Does each cycle return measurable gain in stability or sensitivity? Run that audit and the projection becomes an engine that learns. Fail it and the perimeter dims until the universe you cast stops being a universe and collapses into weather. From here, the text turns to the living tether between image and organizer, how maintenance, correction, and development braid together so that the projector grows in power as the projection gains coherence, a two-way climb on a single rope. This is the hinge where the projector and the projection learn each other. After building universe matter and setting the tides, the logos faces a true other. The thought form in its aura begins to answer back. Subject meets object and both adapt. Focused awareness lives in the universe where attention is bright. Subconscious awareness remains turned to the cosmos where the great rings beat. Those cosmic pulses shake the subconscious. Their sensations are sifted and transmitted into the projected field as new tendencies, new limits, new opportunities. Because the universe runs on a smaller radius, its rhythms are quicker. Feedback comes in fast loops, and the slower logoidal adjustments take that data like a heartbeat monitor, feeding a surgeon mid-operation. You get a pedagogy by design. Rapid cycles educate the slow center without destroying it. Natural law is the memory of how the logos reacts under pressure. As the logoidal consciousness modifies itself in response to cosmic environment and the universe's replies, those settled reactions stabilize as characterizations of matter and relation. You humans later call them gravity, inertia, conservation, names for habits that proved reliable. Note the asymmetry of knowledge built into the arrangement. Objective awareness in the manifested universe diffuses around the central type of atom, and no unit can perceive the logos directly. Only its influences braided through law and tide. The old phrase, "No man hath at any time seen God," is a statement about signal paths. The transmitter is never in the receiver's eye, only in the received pattern. This is power with distance, sovereignty expressed as reliability. History enters as proportion. As the logos experiences changing ratios among its own forces, due to ring phase, ray position, and external contacts, fresh self-concepts form and are added to the complex. Each addition conditions what the universe can express in the next outflowing. That is why epochs feel different down on the shop floor. The projector has learned something, and the cast must now include that learning. Early cycles look turbulent because habits have not yet proved themselves under diversity of impact. Irregular orbits and cross-plane passings abound. Compensation hunts them down over ages, smooths the noise, and folds the lesson into structure. The result is a moving equilibrium, stable enough to build on, flexible enough to take the next hit without shattering. The practical heart is the mirror wheel. Projection throws a pattern out, the universe reacts and returns a signal. The logos integrates and throws again, slightly altered, slightly wiser. Run enough loops and you get auto-reactions, reflexes that no longer need attention to fire, and a growing memory that stabilizes invention without freezing it. Keep the roles precise. To the universe, the logos is infinite and omnipotent by definition. It is the field's law and limit. To the cosmos, that same logos is finite, conditioned, one evolving center among larger weathers. Precision matters because it keeps the work clean. Your tests are simple. Does the image answer reliably? Does the center learn from the answer? Do the laws that emerge increase freedom without losing coherence? And does the cycle time between cast and correction shorten as competence grows? If so, the relation is healthy. If not, you are preying to your own noise. Each evolutionary phase adds a fresh possible reaction and then rings every change upon it against what already exists, as if you were adding one bell to a tower and trying every peal it can make with the old metal. Projection, perception, reaction, reprojection, duplicating mirrors turning on a single axle. The logos throws an image, becomes aware of it, reacts, and that reaction alters the next throw. Reciprocity is law. Awareness in the subject must be echoed by awareness in the object. Yet the object can only know itself and the subject's influences, braided through form and tide. That is why no unit inside the field perceives the projector directly. The transmitter is hidden in the reliability of the pattern, never in the beam of a face. When a phase has exhausted its workable variations, there is a deliberate pause, an appraisal, the cosmic equivalent of seeing that it is good, and only then does the wheel take on new speed. Memory is defined with surgical clarity. Ideas about the subject reacting among themselves leave a track in space, pure movement without object. That flowing track is memory, and it reproduces an image of action on another plane. Consciousness, then, is reaction plus memory. Awareness is only the interplane reaction, the contact point where the wheel touches ground. With that in place, the framework that organized the universe hardens into a third manifestation. Auto-reactions as persistent currents in force. They endure because they have no friction and no substance to rot. This is the hidden engine behind the old line that out of chaos issues creation. Once a clean track exists, passing energy will choose it, the way water chooses a cut in rock. Law itself is only the settled habit of the logoidal consciousness under pressure, stable characterizations of response later discovered by you humans as sequences, equations, rules. Those persistent tracks do more than store history. They capture traffic. Passing atoms fall into the groove and are compelled to run it for a time before breaking free, carrying an imprint when they go. Here is the germ of an oversoul, a collective psychic field made not of things but of preferred motions. Expect turbulence whenever a new reaction factor is added. The first passes are sloppy, cross-plane, irregular. Compensation follows with grim patience, smoothing the jag, strengthening the curve, turning shock into technique. The discipline is cadence. Add, ring the changes, pause for absorption, add again. Skip the pause and the field phrase. Linger too long and the groove deepens into a rut that resists evolution. Precision means knowing when movement needs more movement and when movement needs stillness to become memory. Translate this into mind work, and it stops being mystical and starts being tactical. Diagnose whether you face immediate reaction, awareness, or sedimented track, memory. Train by laying deliberate tracks in space, repetitions designed as frictionless grooves, until auto-reactions fire without supervision and attention is freed for new work. Build a wheel of duplicating mirrors around your craft. Project a unit that actually knows how to answer. Observe the answer, alter the projection, test again, then pause for consolidation. Keep an audit for cycle hygiene. Did the new factor truly add capacity? Did compensation complete? Did the pause occur? Did law emerge as increased reliability rather than dogma? Run that discipline and your field becomes a learning engine. From here, the next move is natural. Integrate the inherent reactions with the compensations harvested from environment until consciousness is born in full, coherent, and dangerous to your old limitations. Consciousness, in this doctrine, is not a halo, it is an engineering achievement. Reaction plus memory woven so tightly that any change anywhere triggers compensatory adjustments everywhere. Awareness alone is cheap. It is just the interplane spark where contact happens. Memory is the crucial upgrade. Ideas concerning the subject reacting among themselves leave a persistent track in space, pure movement without substance, a frictionless groove that reproduces action on another plane. Once those tracks exist, reactions stop being isolated flares and start behaving as a system with feedback. Now the great entity carries two layers. A basic consciousness, stereotyped reactions forged in earlier phases, and a compensatory layer evoked by fresh conditions. That pair maps to what you call individuality and personality. Today's personality, trained under the new factor, sediments into tomorrow's individuality. History is just the rollover schedule for what used to be difficult and is now nature. Distribute attention correctly, and the old puzzle clarifies. Units in the manifested field cannot look up to the logos. They can only register its influences braided through law, tide, and limit. Objective awareness concentrates around the simplest central type atoms because simple carriers are the most conductive. Complexity adds function but also noise. So the proverb holds, no one sees the projector, only the pattern. Meanwhile, memory's physics does the heavy lifting. Because the groove is substanceless, it does not decay. It persists as an invitation. Passing energy chooses the cut the way water chooses a channel. This is how law hardens, not as edict, but as the most efficient route proven under pressure. Name it gravity or inertia if you like. Under the hood, it is a stabilized logoidal habit that has passed every stress test the cosmos could throw at it, and now trains newcomers by the sheer economy of its path. Autoreactions are the first great social technology of a universe, persistent currents in force that catch traffic. When atoms fall into the Oversoul's groove, they are compelled to run it for a time, then peel off, carrying the imprint. Each pass deepens the rut and tweaks it, because no traveler is perfectly identical to the last. You get collective memory that both preserves and learns, a field that remembers how to move and refines its choreography with every cycle. Expect noise every time a new reaction factor is introduced. Irregular orbits, cross-plane passings, the newborn flail of a system taking its first breath. Compensation follows, not as mercy but as mechanics. The rough edges are abraded by repetition until the curve is clean and the track takes less energy to follow than to resist. The cadence is sacred. Add the factor, ring the changes, pause to consolidate, then move again. Break cadence, and the field frays. Overhold and it ossifies. Translate it into practice, and you have a hard method for mind work. Diagnose what is present. Is this an immediate reaction demanding attention, or a sedimented track you can trust? If it is raw, train it. Lay deliberate grooves by repetition until the response is frictionless and no longer rents attention you need for novel impacts. If it is a track, audit it. Does it still save energy under current conditions, or is it a fossil groove that now taxes the field? Build your personality deliberately. Those compensations are the living edge. Then let them roll down into individuality once they prove stable under stress. Keep ceremony with the pause. Integration is a phase, not a luxury. The birth of consciousness is simply this done at scale, a universe-wide upgrade from scattered sparks to a coordinated engine where memory routes force, reactions keep tempo, and the whole learns to move as one without losing the capacity to change. Mind begins before things, in motion that has no object. The doctrine is stark. Life, mind, and deity are grounded in pure movement. Manifestation is what happens when objects move, but consciousness is what happens when movement itself keeps going after the objects stop. Every passage leaves a track in space. The event ends. The track persists, frictionless because it is not made of matter. Those tracks organize among themselves, interacting rhythms that outlive the dancers. And this organization is memory. When the field accumulates enough of these coordinated grooves, a single great oversoul flickers on, not as a ghost, but as a choreography that compels. The oversoul is the first development of consciousness in a universe, a durable pattern of preferred pathways that can be entered, used, and edited by everything that passes. Mind in the singular is an emergent order of tracks. It is the grammar of motion learning to speak. Grooves compel. When atoms cross an oversoul track, they are caught and run the rut for a time, then peel off, carrying an imprint that slightly modifies the track for the traveler. Capture, compulsion, modification, the cycle that turns memory into education. Meanwhile, a second sorting is underway. Simple atoms that truly belong to a plane weave mutually canceling tracks that become the elemental essence of that plane. These are the stable backgrounds, the mediums. More composite atoms cannot settle. Weight and angle drive them outward. where they rebound and return like the old traveling atoms of the cosmos. As logoidal images descend from concept toward manifestation, they pass through the same phase as pure movement, that is the handshake protocol. Concept can touch track because both are motion without substance. The result is influence with teeth. A logos can nudge a group memory field without brute force, simply by tuning the cadence that the track already prefers. As the reflections of cosmic atoms assemble around a great entity and are arranged into a miniature cosmos, the organized tracks begin to interreact. Here, mind emerges in embryo, not a single thought, but the orchestration of reactions coordinated by persistent interplane images carried by the tracks. Group consciousness arrives first. The Oversoul focuses the behavior of many units long before clean individuals separate. Identity grows by alternating capture and critique. Units are trained by the groove, then they edit it in passing. The group field teaches and is taught at once. If you want to spot this birth in any system, look for 4 signatures: tracks that outlive events, compulsion effects on passersby, the track's modification by those same passersby, and a rising coordination among tracks that turns noise into ensemble. When those 4 are present, mind is no longer a metaphor. It is operational. The practitioner's lens is blunt. Diagnose whether you are dealing with raw events or with grooves. Do not argue with grooves, use them. Lay deliberate tracks by repetition until the response is cheaper to run than to resist. That is how you build a field that remembers. When a new factor is added, expect turbulence and give compensation time to grind it smooth. Audit the oversoul you inhabit. Is the compulsion saving energy or taxing it? Are travelers leaving the groove stronger and the groove cleaner? Is coordination among tracks increasing range without sacrificing timing? Group consciousness is the scaffolding. Individual consciousness differentiates within it by holding a private cadence against the group's baseline without tearing the song. That differentiation will need a vehicle, a 7-plane instrument a seed atom can play, which is exactly where the doctrine turns next. The unit of evolution arrives as a 3-part engine, a divine spark that is literally a logoidal track in space, a pure movement impressed with tendency, a seed atom that can translate impacts into structured responses, and a first envelope drawn from 7th-plane atoms that settle into its orbit. This is a unit because the forces intercompensate. Touch any part and the whole answers, like a living gyroscope. From the first moment, the spark stands at a crossroads of 3 streams it must braid into music. Experience transmitted through the seed atom in quick, local rhythms, the slower, tidal influence of the logos itself, and the lateral, jittery signals from fellow sparks. Coordination is the first duty. Without correlation, the streams jam. With it, the mixed stresses tune into a regular beat that holds relation under load. Group relations stabilize around that beat, and when they do, the system has reached a local zenith where real building can begin. Construction follows a strict kinematic law. Shells are added not by moving through space, but by changing the pattern of motion so that atoms of the lower plane can participate. A shift of cadence recruits new substance. Coordination always draws matter. What was a static unit becomes a spinning ring, and spinning rings harvest the plane below. The shell sequence climbs downward plane by plane until a 7-plane vehicle stands. 7th as the first envelope, then the 6th latches when the motion can receive it, and so on, each addition locked by rhythm rather than place. This solves the old riddle of development without migration. The spark does not travel to fetch its body. It edits its movement until new matter can answer. You can feel the elegance, selection by resonance, not by distance. The vehicle is a score the spark gradually learns to play, each shell a new instrument section that only joins when the tempo is right. Swarms supply the architecture. The first swarm, thrown forward under inherent forces, hacks forms out of raw habit. Later swarms are launched seeded with the achievements of the first as archetypal ideas. This is involution, the implanting of pattern ahead of time. Evolution is those archetypes stepping down the planes as shells accrete, finding expression appropriate to each medium. Fortune hangs a mnemonic on the scaffold. Plane symbols cascade 7 to 1 with facet counts that sum to the operational 10, forces in manifestation. So each plane carries a signature polygon and a prime rhythm the builder can memorize and test against. None of this is esoteric decoration. It is a field manual for keeping the angles clean as complexity rises. Miss the polygon and your shell will take charge of you. Hit it, and the shell becomes a faithful amplifier instead of a parasite. When sparks correlate under the logoidal tides, their composite cadence mirrors an abstract replica of the logos. Form side, atoms grouped about the nuclear seed atom present as geometry. The earliest globe Fortune gives as a three-sided pyramid enclosed by a sphere, a shape that screams constraint plus expansion in one figure. That is the first planetary form, born from synchronized sparks wearing 7 plane vehicles tuned by archetype and ringed by proper shells. The practical translation is blunt. Build correlation before power. Add shells only when your movement can carry them without wobble. Audit your 3 streams, logos, seed, peers, and force them to music. Track the plane signatures and refuse any structure that cannot keep time with its own polygon. Do this, and a vehicle appears that can stand the weather of a universe. Fail it, and the body you build will own you. From here, the doctrine turns outward to what such vehicles make together, the evolution of the first planetary form proper, and the pressures that will try to break it. Reciprocity among sparks snaps the field into focus and a globe condenses. On the abstract side, a replica of the logos. On the form side, a 3-sided pyramid inside a sphere, the planetary figure built from atoms disciplined along lines of force to their seed atoms. What holds it together is locked motion. Any series of fully compensatory changes settles into a cycle, and cycles trap energy as spinning rings. Points are units, rings are organisms. Once the ring is running, force is banked, not bled, and the globe becomes a living gyroscope. The traveling atom belongs to the cosmos and carries the taste of the ultimate source. The logos projects the regimen, rings, rays, phases, that conditions a universe. Under that regimen, cosmic atoms recruit by the million and are kidnapped into order, their wild tangentials converted into a stress lattice the logos can use. From that lattice, the planetary spirit emerges, a system of stresses that equips itself with a definite spherical form and stamps its plane with a personality. The swarm that did the heavy lifting leaves fingerprints. If the lords of flame were primary, magnetic stresses dominate. If the lords of form, you get sediment laid into shells by those stresses. If the lords of mind, elaboration waits for predecessors and then threads the maze. Later swarms arrive into this pre-wired weather. As sparks traverse planes, they gather shells of the local matter. Under certain phase conditions, those shells disintegrate and are retained by the sphere, thickening the planet's body on that plane like a reef built from cast-off armor. The cadence is strict. Go forth, build, pause, shed, retain, and the pauses are subjective. Logoidal phases where the clock is reset and the next run is stacked with the last run's gains. A planetary spirit does more than manage climate. It acts as archetype for its plane, working through lower shells while its higher components are drawn from the very lives evolving inside its reach. Its higher self depends on its inhabitants. That is the kind of theology I respect, feedback with consequences. Fortune's occult mapping ties planes to the familiar planets to give your memory handholds, Earth to dense physical, Moon to etheric, Mars to instinct and passion, Venus to abstract emotion, Saturn to concrete mind. Mercury to abstract mind, Jupiter to concrete spiritual, and the Sun as logoidal symbol, each a tuner for a stratum of reaction. As sparks synchronize, reciprocal consciousness opens between satellite and great entity. The entity sees with one eye, the satellite sees like a spider, many eyes that converge into focus only when group mind actually holds the beat. When it holds, law becomes experience. When it wobbles, mythology becomes weather. Keep the figures straight because they are operational mnemonics. The globe takes a three-faceted pyramid and sphere on the 7th plane. Descending planes add facets up to 9, totals summing to 10, forces in manifestation, while 9 marks the first plane cosmic number that waits at the root. At the edges of progress, the doctrine names 3 conditions worth fearing and using. Sublimation is the clean elevation of blocked force to new aspect. Degradation is prolonged, checking that slides a type backwards toward primitive behavior. Epigenesis is free play from superabundant energy in transition that seeds novelty and mishandled breeds the doctrine's account of evil. The method is unsentimental. Lock motion before you scale, accept the planetary spirit's weather without surrendering to it. Time your swarms, flame, form, mind, so each actually stands on the others, and treat shells as earned, not assumed. Do that, and a world appears that can carry intelligence without cracking. Fail it, and the same stresses that build a planet will grind one down to dust. Meet the regents as operational laws wearing faces. Lords of flame stand behind the raw kinetics of a world. Heat, shock, ion, the galvanic stresses that make matter lively. Lords of form stand behind affinities and structures, bonds, lattices, rhythms that shape and then break shapes. Lords of mind move inside individuation and the laws of living organization, selection, adaptation, attention. Their evolutions are asymmetrical on purpose. Flame withdraws up the planes as reactions become automatic, ceding the foreground once its drills are learned. Form advances by teaching lessons to the logoidal consciousness, leaving stereotyping pressures that globes bake into shells. Mind evolves continuously, pausing only to add original factors, because it treats with individuals directly and can bend a swarm without battering the planet. What they leave behind is clear and trackable. Flame leaves charge and cadence. Form leaves shells and outlines. Mind leaves distinct centers that can say I without shattering the field. Influence channels are not democratic. Flame primarily conditions the life spark's vitality in the field's base rhythms. Form primarily conditions the globe itself, the planetary spirit and its body, rather than the sparks. Mind carries predominating influence wherever it touches because it negotiates with units rather than atmospheres. After at one ment, their offices shift into an economy of powers. Lords of Flame become conditioning agents of the basic forces and instruments for logoidal compensations, the hidden drivers that retime a world when it slips. Lords of Form become impressors of archetypal concepts, the great pattern makers whose rhythms include the law of death. Forms must break so force can be released and reassigned. Lords of Mind serve as mediators moving up and down the planes, the couriers who bring instruction both ways. Under this triune regime, scaling is possible. Physics trains chemistry, chemistry trains biology, biology trains society. Mastery proceeds by subduing flame in form and then form in mind. Discipline and punishment distributed along that gradient. Everything hums to that cadence, swarms moving in synchrony, flame, then form, then mind, each waiting for the other's end product. Flame lays the magnetic stresses, form lays sediment into spherical shells along those lines of force, mind threads the complexity and individualizes. Returns and pauses punctuate the drama, subjective logoidal phases where inward appraisal resets the clock and launches the next outward run, seeded with what was gained, archetypes implanted by involution. The senior wave always shapes the junior in a pattern that looks like initiation, and the doctrine is unflinching about edge conditions. When progress is checked, superabundant energies play free. That is epigenesis, the birthplace of novelty and the root of what you call evil. A mistimed liberty that can sublime to a new aspect if governed, or degrade a type toward primitive behavior if indulged. The form builders, the lords of rhythm and givers of death, hold the hammer here. Ancient blacksmith gods are their folklore, breaking to bless, killing to release. A lord of mind on a plane is an unperceived center of force. Use a local vehicle and it can shed elements to seed a new vehicle, carrying its own life impulse, a clean prototype for the doctrine of virgin birth and for saviors who arrive already powered. Elementals staffed by the lords of flame maintain the coordinated rhythms of inanimate nature. Many flames are archangelic forces, or condition a sphere via special solar logoidal contacts. Approach without authority produces backlash, which occultists later mistake for malice. The late synthesis is subtle. Though flame and mind do not meet directly during the first three swarms, a lord of mind can later absorb the far-off experience of a lord of flame and go forth with that ancient fire working behind the mind as a second sight. Strategy for practitioners is crisp. Learn the physics to anchor the chemistry. Learn the chemistry to give the mind purchase, then let the mind govern the rest without despising its scaffolding. Respect the hammers. Use them. And when the form resists the next ascent, accept the death that frees the force, or the force will take its freedom through you. On the return leg, the regents step back across the same chain of globes they once helped raise, but the scenery has changed. Each globe is now fully built and already inhabited by the swarm grinding its way outward. Two evolutions share a world, junior on the climb, senior on the homeward sweep. The awareness split is surgical. The seniors function inside an established group mind and so carry a consolidated subjective consciousness. The juniors, still assembling their group mind, move within a limited subjectivity and cannot directly perceive their elders even while bathing in their influence. Education arrives by mechanism, not lecture. Impactation is the method. The seniors' seed atoms vibrate a cyclic rhythm that is induced in the juniors' outer shells, entraining them to the older cadence until, at the close of the globe period, accord is achieved. Only then do the juniors register the seniors, indirectly, by noticing precise alterations in their own outermost shell. Recognition comes as self-reading, never as vision. The juniors move on, the seniors turn back along the chain, work completed for that station. The tools are the shells the seniors carry. They have not been sloughed. Each plane shell remains an instrument to act on and react to that plane's matter, extending efficacy even beyond a globe's immediate sphere. That makes interplane leverage practical. The seniors can condition atmospheres the juniors must learn to breathe. Influence, however, is not uniform. Lords of Flame chiefly touch the evolving life sparks wherever they occupy a globe. Lords of Form avoid the sparks deliberately, stereotyping the planetary framework instead, the planetary spirit and its vehicle, because direct form pressure would freeze the sparks before they learn to move. Lords of Mind operate on individuals, and wherever they contact, they dominate, because individuation is the master key. This asymmetry explains the world's shape. The form builders lodge their imprint in the planet's vehicle, not in the sparks. Therefore, the most primitive and persistent vehicle is a sphere, an inorganic accretion around a nucleus of attraction, ready for any species of life to rent. Initiation has a prototype here that is all physics and no incense. From the first homeward turn, there are always two evolutions on a globe, and the senior influences the junior precisely in the aspect matching its own nature. Flame tunes vitality and cadence. Form sets the constraints and breaks them on schedule. Mind wakes the unit inside the crowd. Vibratory law favors the quicker rhythm, so the lords of mind can tune up specially capable juniors one by one, cutting diagonals across evolutionary time by sympathetic induction from the return arc. These initiates then act as local accelerants, teaching their swarm to adapt faster to new plane conditions without buckling the planetary chassis the form builders maintain. Meanwhile, the senior's task is subtraction, not addition. Withdraw from limitations while retaining capacities. When a plane's reactions have become wholly automatic, they sink below awareness. The lower plane atoms can no longer accommodate the senior's increased rate. The shell is shed and ascent continues. Capacity kept, constraint gone. Read any shared world phase with 5 questions, and you will not lose the plot. Which region is active here? Which swarm is senior? Where exactly is impactation being felt in the junior shells? What shells are the seniors using as vehicles to reach across? Is the influence shaping sparks, flame or mind, or stereotyping the planetary framework form? Add one more ruthless check. Is the juniors' recognition of the seniors arriving as a change they can measure in their own edge layer at the period's end? If yes, the tuning has taken. If no, the cadence did not catch. This is how large systems pass wisdom without words. Rhythm transmitted through structure until structure begins to sing it back. The target is clean enough to fit on one line. A swarm graduates when each unit holds a stable, self-conscious individuality that stays in full reciprocal relation, internally across all shells, laterally with its group mind, vertically with the planetary spirit, and hierarchically with the presiding logos, without losing itself to any of them. The test is operational. Under tide, every plane vehicle must answer impact with compensatory adjustments of the whole. No shell is a diva. No shell is dead weight. Days and nights become tools instead of weather. Ray passages are ridden like rails instead of endured like fate. The historical trick is the rollover. What you train now is compensatory reaction, personality, sediments into inherent, always-on power, individuality. Finish that conversion across the cycle's essential competencies, and you stop playing catch-up with conditions. You start shaping conditions on arrival. Freedom shows up in a single kinematic hallmark. You withdraw from a plane's limitations while retaining its gift. The shell is no longer a jail. It is a glove you put on when the work demands grip. Relation at scale is the proof. The group mind ceases to be an atmosphere you drown in and becomes a band you can join on tempo without dissolving your tone. You hear the planetary cadence, contribute to it, and refuse stereotyping when it would flatten your signature, cooperation without capture. Meanwhile, the Oversoul's grooves get an upgrade instead of an erasure. Autoreactions stop acting like ruts and start acting like a guidance system that saves energy for invention. Ethics becomes geometry with skin in the game. Choose acts that preserve and enlarge the field's ability to evolve, eliminate dispersive moves that leak charge, and break calcifications before they ossify. Conscience is no halo. It is practiced sensitivity to field integrity, knowing when the pattern can take more load and when it needs release. Timing is the razor. You cross the nadir in phase, engines aligned, neither retroverting out of fear nor forcing a backward run to look heroic. Hit that turn clean and the outward arc is over. The return can start without wreckage. Acceleration is not an accident, it is initiation as physics. A fraction of the swarm is tuned by sympathetic impactation from seniors and then becomes duty-bound accelerants for the mean. They cut diagonals across evolutionary time, teach others how to time their entries to the days, where to bail during a night, how to use ray changes for leverage instead of whiplash. Their mandate is ruthless and kind. Raise the floor while lifting the ceiling, build a reproducible path rather than a museum of prodigies. This is where the lords make their final imprint. Flame retimes vitality when swarms lag. Form imposes and relaxes constraints on schedule so force can be released and reassigned. Mind trains individuation until it can bear contact with power without going feral. When progress is checked, epigenesis flares, free play from superabundant energy, seedbed of novelty, and if unmanaged, the root of your universe is evil. Govern it and it becomes sublimation, a clean change of aspect. Indulge it and degradation drags types backward toward primitive appetite. The grown mind learns which is which by cost accounting in the field. Completion looks like portability. Shells that once compelled are shed as bindings but kept as instruments. You can assume or abstain by decision, operate across planes by deliberate fit instead of automatic compulsion. The memory economy is tight. Oversoul grooves are polished to save energy system-wide while leaving enough play for invention. History serves the work rather than dictating it. On the far side of the turn, graduates take office. Some join the conditioning agencies of flame to retime forces. Some become form impressors to stamp archetypes where they will hold. Some serve in mind as mediators between logos and universe, running messages up and down the planes. The goal of a swarm is therefore not escape but mastery in relation, a cadre of units who can keep themselves whole while carrying the world forward. With that standard set, the next movement is discipline. Tabulate the influences, codify the laws, and fix the timing so the swarms that follow do not have to buy every lesson with blood and waste. Here's the control panel in one view. Evolution is worked on by three stacked classes of influence. First, the logoidal, pressures on the logos from the cosmic rings and rays, and the internal modifications the logos makes in response to its universe. Second, the influences of the manifested universe itself, plane conditions as standing weather, star logoi as ray-typed exemplars that fix tendencies in bulk, planetary spirits as stress architects of a globe, and other evolutions sharing your planet as cross-currents. Third, the inherited factors, the stereotyped reactions laid down by predecessors that arrive as built-in laws. Use this like a reduction kit. Any developmental move you care to analyze can be expressed as the sum of these levers acting together in time. If your model cannot map to this table, it is not a model. It is sentiment dressed as causality. The logoidal stratum sets type. Whichever logoidal influence predominates at the launch of a new phase stamps the kind of life or vehicle that will evolve across that phase. Think of it as the opening key signature for the epoch. Everything will be scored to it until the next reset. Then the universe-level stack modulates the tune. Plain weather grants or withholds certain reactions. Star logoi broadcast templates that crowds unconsciously copy. Planetary spirits set the chassis tolerances. Cohabiting evolutions inject both friction and technique by simple proximity. Down in the marrow run the factors, the laws you inherit before you make a single choice, action and reaction, limitation, 7 deaths, impactation across planes, the aspects of force, polarity, the pull of outer space, the call of the center. These do not ask permission. They are the grooves in which your freedom is forced to become skill. Operationally, the table becomes a discipline. Start at the top, name the logoidal influence currently dominant, and write the epochal type it implies. Step to the middle, log which plane's weather is active, which star ray family is saturating your field, what the planetary spirit is stereotyping just now, and what other evolutions are co-occupying your sphere. Finish at the bottom, run each move against the factors. Does your act respect the law of limitation, or pretend to be bigger than the ring past not? Are you using polarity to gain torque, or just oscillating? Are you translating force across planes by impactation or bleeding it as heat? Reduction is not reductionism. It is clarity that saves energy. When you can tabulate influence, you can budget attention, schedule pressure, and predict failure modes before they eat the mission. This section is the hinge into sidereal practice. Having sorted the drawers, logos, universe factors, the text will tune the sky clock, positive and negative phases of the rings, progress through the 12 rays, equinox keys that unlock macro timing, cometary irregulars that carry warnings from subtler planes. Expect specificity. Expect a calendar you can work with. The promise is simple. Learn the table, then learn the tides that move across it, and you stop guessing at destiny. You start navigating it. Shift the lens from personality weather to cosmic sea state. Sidereal work reads the big engine. 3 rings running in positive and negative phases, 12 rays whose action flips when the tide flips, 7 planes that carry the result down the stack. A great entity meets every ray twice, once as intensifying inflow, once as accelerated outflow, and what it builds or breaks depends on which quarter the rings are asserting. Calculation starts with precession. Derive equinoctial positions, establish the active ring influence, and mark whether your heavenly house is in its binding or loosening aspect. This is macro timing with teeth. Ignore it and your finer arithmetic is falsified at the door. There are 4 subphases inside a ring phase, enough structure to schedule real operations, enough danger to punish hubris. Cosmic tides do not hit you directly. They strike the logos first, then transmit through planetary spirits and group tracks before they ever ripple your nervous system. That is why ancient astrological statements remain fundamentally true while needing correction for evolutionary state and routing loss. The tide sets prime conditions for building or demolition. The ray in force sets the mode. Get the sign wrong, and you will try to condense forms during a quarter that is prying structure apart, or attempt dissolution while the field is locking like ice. Use the sign and the ray, and you can choose craft that harmonizes with the push. Build on the day, unbind on the night, and time your transitions to the 4 subphases so you do not shear your own gears. Beyond the regular clock are irregulars, approaches from great entities on subtler planes. They correlate with comets, and the doctrine is gloriously practical about it. Spectroscopic fingerprints are correspondential clues to qualitative effect. Some comets are scavengers, sweeping epigenetically ruined units to the system's edge, the unknown death. They have no evolving group soul, sidereal idiots running errands across the dark. Treat them as warnings and as payloads. Check the spectra, match the signatures, decide whether the passing is a purge, a tonic, or a contagion. Then, route your response through the actual transmission chain, logos to planetary spirit to group to unit, so you do not mistake a cosmic gust for your personal weather and prescribe the wrong medicine. Crises arrive at phase changes, and especially at the nadir. The rule is merciless: cross the bottom in phase or pay in reversions. There are 2 doors to the left-hand path: premature retroversion before the nadir, and a deliberate cross-current after it. Both are timing crimes. The operational workflow is clear. 1. Compute equinoctial position to name the ring phase and sign. 2. Identify the ray now in its positive or negative aspect. 3. Check for cometary perturbations and other extraplanar brushings. 4. Route all of it through the planetary spirit and group grooves before reading human outcomes. Do this, and destiny turns into navigation. Fail it, and you will call your own phase errors fate. The next chapter tightens the loop again, how the logos reallocates attention across its universe in great and lesser days and nights, and how you time your work to that breathing. The logos looks 2 ways at once, consciously to the universe it has projected, subconsciously to the cosmos whose rings and rays beat like a deep drum. Cosmic pulses touch the subconscious first. Their pressure enters the projection as altered law, timing, and opportunity. Then the conscious logos reads those changes inside its own field. This split produces great and lesser days and nights of Brahma. In a constructive quarter, attention engages the manifested field. In a destructive quarter, it withdraws, leaving the universe governed by the laws the logos has already stabilized, while attention reconditions itself. Treat a phase of evolution as an incarnation scaled up. The logos is the divine spark. The universe is the group soul aspect, its individuality, and the evolving swarm is the personality that goes out, takes impacts, and returns with structure hardened from habit into nature. Natural laws are simply the stable characterizations of logoidal reactions to cosmic conditions, memory cast as rule. Development is a reciprocal choreography. Successive evolutions penetrate deeper into form, multiply relations, and hunt balance. As coordination mounts, the universe acts as a whole, becomes fully self-conscious, then acquires objective consciousness and turns to face the logos, reciprocal consciousness achieved. The loop is exact: projection of self-concept, perception of changes in the field, reaction in the logos, reprojection with the modification encoded. Because the universe runs on a smaller radius, its rhythms are quicker, so feedback arrives fast enough to educate without capsizing the center. Governance is attention management. In days, the logos drives. In nights, generated law carries the load while the logos remaps itself. Read any epoch by asking 3 questions. Where is logoidal attention, day or night? Which stage of the swarm's incarnation is active? Launch, crisis, consolidation, return. Through which subconscious channels are cosmic stimulations entering? Ring phase, ray aspect, external organism contact. Completion has a signature. When logoidal and universal consciousness become identical in kind, backgrounds still distinct, the logos absorbs the universe's consciousness. Organized reaction systems are withdrawn to the cosmic level, and the atoms of the universe revert to uncoordinated tangential motion, the lesser chaos, old night. That is the great pralaya, with lesser pralayas at the end of each evolutionary phase when the logos pauses, appraises, and modifications are stamped in. The next swarm launches bearing those gains as inherent capacity. But residues remain. Matter on each plane keeps the knack of past forms and reassembles them more readily with every cycle. Later waves are compelled to use these molds, helpful short-term, retrogressive if overused, one seed of deformation and the doctrine's account of evil. Free will enters as epigenesis, surplus energy in the interval that can invent cleanly or contaminate. Before synthesis back to the logos, that free play is where positive evil arises in manifestation. Untrained liberty that writes its own rut and drags others into it. The danger point is the nadir, where fundamentals are studied under pressure and the perimeter shines with counterfeit promises from beyond the ring past not, abortive images calling across the gulf. The safe rule is merciless. Reject the outer space temptation at bottom, regain equilibrium, then withdraw bearing the reactions you have earned. Leap lawlessly and you fall into the mystery of evil. Consummate law in perfect obedience and you pass into the mystery of Godhead. Operationally, this section is a manual for governance by attention. Time your work to the logoidal day or night. Decipher which logoidal modification is setting type for the epoch. Track how the subconscious channel is importing cosmic tides, and measure whether your field is moving toward reciprocal consciousness or toward collapse into lesser chaos. Hold the metronome, honor the ring, and you will feel the moment when law becomes character, and the universe can be safely taken up and set down again for the next lesson. Inside the universe, the power is in molds. Think of the planes as standing weather built by earlier cycles, stereotyped reactions that behave like abstract casts you must pour your force through if you want results. Mastery begins when you can handle the elemental essence of a plane, its manipulable substratum, without being stereotyped by it. Above that weather sit the planetary spirits, vast artificial elementals functioning as the group soul of a plane through the planes below. Their higher individuality is literally co-authored by the lives evolving within their sphere, which means the planet's higher self is a ledger of its inhabitants' best work. Dominion on any stratum is rapport with its spirit, not domination over it. Because these spirits are mighty and mindless, each is assigned a guide of the first evolution, a lord of flame, known as the archangel of the sphere. Knowledge of that name is not a parlor trick. It is the lawful channel for command and regeneration, the safe wire to handle voltage without frying your circuits. Do not confuse these with star logoi. Planetary spirits tune a plane. Star logoi are zodiacal lords of mind, ray-typed group minds built as artificial elementals by the evolution proceeding under their sector. Each evolution builds its star logos by taming that cosmic aspect. When the tide that birthed it recedes, the logos remains as a standing transmitter for later work. Now splice the stack together in practice. Planets map to planes as operational mnemonics. Earth dense physical, Moon etheric, Mars instinct and passion, Venus abstract emotion, Saturn concrete mind, Mercury abstract mind, Jupiter concrete spiritual, Sun as logoidal symbol. On the outgoing arc, an evolution develops the corresponding factor. On return, it seeks mastery by sympathetic rapport with the planet's spirit. This is how the sky becomes a workshop. Rays saturate tendency, planetary spirit set chassis limits, plain weather supplies or withholds materials, and your craft is choosing which lever to pull first and how hard. Multiple evolutions can occupy the same globe and never touch, because contact requires shared state of consciousness. When contacts do occur, they show up as psychism, downward perception of what is below your evolution, or upward perception of what is above. The rule is blunt. Looking forward along the right-hand path, upward rapport that stretches you, is permissible and often necessary. Looking backward along the left-hand path, down into castes you have outgrown, is retrogression, a glamour that drags individuality back into stereotype. The form builder's signature explains the persistence of spheres. Stereotyping inheres in the planetary vehicle, not in individual sparks, so the most primitive, durable vehicle is a sphere, an inorganic accretion around a nucleus of attraction that any species can rent. That is the planet as chassis, rugged, round, and shamelessly reusable. Transmission is always chained. Logos first, then planetary spirit, then group tracks, then units. Ancient astrology is fundamentally true because it reads the pattern at the right altitude, but it must be corrected for routing and for evolutionary state. In operational terms, read any field with a 5-point audit. 1. Name the plane weather and identify its elemental essence, the stuff you can actually shape. 2. Identify the ruling planetary spirit and the archangelic channel that lets you address it without poisoning the line. 3. Note which star logo's ray family is saturating the field right now and what behavior it tends to amplify. 4. List cohabiting evolutions and decide whether any contact is upward or downward psychism. 5. Inventory the inherited stereotypes, tracks in space you are engaging or resisting. Then act. Molds will aid and deform in the same breath. Use them to save energy, refuse them where they misfit the type you are building, and you will move through the universe's interior machinery without becoming its product. Different evolutions can occupy the same planet without ever sharing a conversation. They are separated by arc and by state, not by distance. Involutionary lives are descending toward the Earth sphere through the etheric subplanes, packing on shells and learning constraint. Returning lives are ascending, shedding limits while retaining capacities. Layer on top of that a third class that differs in kind rather than degree, and the stage gets crowded fast. Seniors are present as finished offices, lords of flame, form, and mind, behind the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology, each exercising regency through elementals and stress architecture. This is why a world can feel haunted by order even when you cannot see the hands that keep time. You live inside their jurisdiction, whether you believe it or not. Disbelief is not a Faraday cage. Mutual invisibility is normal. Without a common state of consciousness, cohabitants pass like ships in a night with no radar. Juniors live inside the weather generated by seniors and swear the wind is natural. When recognition does arrive, it is indirect. Changes register in one's own shells, altered rhythms, fresh limits, new efficiencies, not as a face appearing in the doorway. Raise consciousness above the dense physical, and you leave Earth's immediate sphere. Jurisdiction shifts to the planetary spirit proper to that plane. That single fact explains half of psychic chaos. People change planes and forget to change law, then wonder why readings go sideways. If you want clean work, file the flight plan. Which plane will you function in? Whose regency governs there? And what tolls are due at the crossing? Contact split into two categories that matter. Forward or upward perception aligns with the right-hand path. Rapport with states ahead of you that stretch, train, and initiate. Backward perception is retrogressive, reaching down into castes you have outgrown. That tug is powerful and sentimental, and it wrecks evolutions. It earthbinds the newly dead if you will not let go, and it drags individuality back into stereotype if you keep playing with yesterday's grooves. The safe rule is blunt. Look forward for instruction. Leave backward alone except for quittance. If you insist on mixing faculties from a later stage with images from an earlier one, correction arrives from the destroyers, and the reduction is to the lowest common denominator. Evolution does not argue, it edits. Education across shared worlds is mechanical, not theatrical. Senior presences tune junior shells by impactation, entraining the outer vehicles to their more stable cadence without overt interference. It is initiation as physics, rhythm broadcast, resonance received, habit upgraded. Meanwhile, remember the regent's grid so your attributions do not tangle. Flame works vitality and base cadence, touching sparks directly. Form stereotypes the planetary framework and pointedly avoids the sparks so they can learn to move. Mind negotiates with individuals and therefore dominates wherever it makes contact. On a mixed planet, ask 5 questions before you act. Which arcs are in play here? Which regent holds office on this plane now? Is any contact I am courting upward or backward? Am I still under Earth's spirit, or did a shift of state move me under another? And where in the junior's moth shells is impactation landing? If you cannot answer cleanly, you are not ready to touch anything. There is a sanctioned exception to the usual non-interference, the Redeemer line. Certain souls choose to forego their private harvest so their good karma is added to racial karma. Organized senior aid underwrites a corridor the rest can use. Call it the Great White Lodge if you like, but keep the engineering in view. It is a redistribution of surplus credit to lift the mean, not a miracle that cancels law. Everything else returns to the same governance. Mixed populations kept orderly by jurisdiction, cadence, and the right use of ignorance, knowing when you cannot see a neighbor and acting accordingly. On a planet like this, wisdom is just good manners at scale. Know your plane, mind your regent, face forward. Read humanity in 3 buckets, or you will misdiagnose the species. Latencies, what the race already carries as inherited tracks. Actualities, what is operational now. Potentialities, faculties pressing the threshold. All 3 are braided with the planet's own 2 faces. The planetary spirit is the planet's personality, mass karma built from realized experience, always one stage behind, therefore atavistic, therefore an earth pull that drags everything toward primitive molds. The planetary entity is the individuality side, the logoidal brief of what the planet is for. Touch the Earth's soul, and you hit the mirror's reversal first. Low strata ride near the surface. The subtle is buried. If you approach through subconsciousness, you fuse with the mass and the lesser falls under the dominion of the greater. Approach with full self-consciousness, or be absorbed by the field you meant to study. Treat the spirit as weather, conditioning, never absolute. Mature operators note the lunar terrestrial phases and analogous timings because they modulate propagation, amplification, and blowback, even when they do not dictate outcome. Humanity conditions itself by atmosphere. Traditions, cults, sites charge specific layers of the planetary spirit. Old centers still stimulate the exact faculties they were built to awaken. If you are deficient, that can balance you. If you are already heavy there, it will overset you. Modern collapses are often autobiographies of people bathing in archaic currents they romanticize. The group soul interlocks with the planetary spirit on a permanent lag. Today's human achievement becomes tomorrow's planetary personality, which means innovative work must push against planetary habit rather than ride it. This is why race memory bites. Molds reform faster each cycle because plain matter remembers what it has done, and later waves are tempted into earlier casts. That is a design feature and a trap. The safety rule is blunt. Forbid backward-looking psychism, except for quittance of the newly dead. Ration atavistic contact. Teach timing against the earth field's tides. Healthy schools act as governors. Unhealthy schools confuse mass glamour for attainment and manufacture possession while calling it initiation. Operationally, run a five-fold audit before you touch a movement, a community, or yourself. 1. Sort the dynamics into latencies, actualities, potentialities. 2. Identify which planetary strata the movement is tapping. Name the layer, not the vibe. 3. Fix operator stance. Are you in full self-consciousness or drifting through subconsciousness where the mass will claim you? 4. Check locality and cultural residues as amplifiers or distorting lenses. 5. Decide whether to counter the earth pull or harness it to restore balance, and set limits either way. Humanity's self-influence is the sum of these choices under a sky of larger tides. Ignore the stack and you will be steered by ghosts with good branding. Keep the stack and you can steer, through law, through timing, into the next lessons where the 7 foundational laws wait like clean tools. Action and reaction, limitation, 7 deaths, impactation, aspects of force, attraction of outer space, attraction of the center. Action and reaction are equal and opposite only on the plane where you pushed. The moment you transmit, the math changes, because transmission happens by subplanes and potency scales by the square. Step up one subplane, and your original effort multiplies by itself. Step down, and it divides by itself. 2 opposed forces meeting cleanly form a vortex, the primal atom, whose neutralization is stored as a center. Separate the currents, and you release 2 potencies equal to that latent store, translated to another level. Stretch the pendulum, and you have a circle. Give it time, and the circle becomes cycles. Karmic recurrence with a time base. Destiny, in this language, is the ledger of returned reactions. Incarnation is the machinery that makes returns readable by limiting the field. If you do not know where the reaction will cash out in the stack, you are gambling with explosives. Predict the destination subplane first, or the equal and opposite you expected will arrive as either a whisper or a hammer. Build the reaction engine by circumscription. Draw the ring, define the conceptual circumference with precision, translate concept into feeling so the ring is alive, drive it with nature so it has fuel. Inside that bounded sphere, actions and reactions become computable and reusable. Outside it, your work spreads like vapor and pays you in noise. This is where the moral calculus stops being vague. Karma returns to the address you stamped on the envelope. If you did not set an address, it circles until it finds a field weak enough to accept it, often yours later at a discount you do not enjoy. Sublimation is a technical choice, not a prayer. Lift the motive, transmit upward, accept the self-multiplication of effect. Degradation is also a choice. Shove force down and accept self-division and coarsening of outcome. Both are lawful. Only one buys leverage. Operational checklist or do not touch the switch. 1. Name the subplane you're actually operating on, not the one you wish you were. 2. Map the transmission path, up, level, or down, and estimate the ratio. 3. Apply the square law to forecast potency at the destination. 4. Set the ring past naught so the return re-enters your field and can be used. 5. Declare the intention, sublimate, hold, or degrade, and log the cost. Then execute and watch curvature. When the arc begins to close, read the circle it is becoming and schedule the next intervention for the right phase. This is how consequences stop being mysteries and start being instruments. Next, we tighten the boundary device itself, the law of limitation. The only way to conserve power long enough for the engine you just built to pay out. Limitation is the first law of power because form is the price of effect. Draw the ring or lose the current. To produce an effect on a given plane, build the channel in the substance just above it and drive force down through that gate. Invoking without directing is how you waste charge and then blame mystery. Limitation is concentration by rejection. Define the end, select the means, cut every desire that is not a load-bearing strut, and the work becomes one-pointed enough for sudden completion. Alternate the narrowing with deliberate breadth so the apex does not snap off its own base. On the mental plane, hold the whole. On the astral, find the joints, lines of cleavage where a fine edge of attention can enter. Then work piece by piece until the mass moves. Power loves resistance because resistance gives purchase. Limitation supplies the thrust block that lets the will bite instead of skid. Incarnation runs on this law. Destiny only becomes computable inside a boundary that returns equal and opposite reactions to sender. Without a ring, there is no address for karma to find you. That is why probationers are kept playing with formless power, so power uses them, until they learn to build channels that obey limitation. The escape is not flight, but dimension. Once the ring is drawn, contemplate the archetype that contains it. Raise awareness to the level where the whole can be seen without strain, draw force from that comprehension, and then re-enter the circumscribed form to concentrate it. Concept to feeling to drive, the three rings as inner engineering. This does not abolish the ring, it lets you work within it without being bound by it. Personality is shaped by what it excludes, individuality by the cosmos it mirrors. The ascent from one to the other climbs 7 rungs, and every rung is a death of some binding that used to be useful. Operationally, correlate the enterprise with the cosmos. Act only on the slice you can actually move. Do not weigh yourself against the mountain. Mark a face, set pythons, climb the pitch, then rest and widen again. Choose the plane you intend to affect, construct the vehicle one level above, fix the ring past naught so returns come home, and log the cost of exclusion as the fee for clarity. Done right, limitation turns from prison to instrument, a clean circumference that conserves power, a tuned channel that delivers it, a ladder of deaths already sketched for the next chapter. We tighten that ladder next, how shedding binds becomes freedom, and why initiation wears a skull with perfect reason. Death here is not drama, it is engineering. Life withdraws from a vehicle, the vehicle returns to its plane, and the garnered reactions translate upward into memory and character. Vehicles are built from above downward and shed in reverse order, which means every clean relinquishment is an ascent. Human scale, there are 7. Physical death returns dense matter to the planetary vehicle and stamps habit energies into the etheric. Etheric death dissolves vital routines and releases attention to the astral. Astral death loosens desire patterns so consciousness can stand in concrete mind. Concrete mental death drops formed concepts and autobiographical debris so abstraction gains room. Abstract mental death releases identification with pure ideas that have not yet individualized. Buddhic death releases group identifications while preserving love as competence. Atmic or causal death withdraws individuality to logoidal silence, the local pralaya where the next curriculum is chosen. None of this annihilates force. Every release feeds substance back to the planet's stock and turns experience into auto-reaction higher up. Character grows by orderly dying. The same law cuts 2 ways. Involuntary deaths close cycles on schedule. Initiatory little deaths rehearse them under guardrails so power can be freed while still embodied. Timing is the razor. Premature shedding blows seams. Obsession, earthbinding, psychism that drags you backward into earlier castes while you still wield later faculties. Hence the ruthless rubric around the newly dead, quittance, not commerce, and the strict ban on backward-looking traffic dressed as kindness. Sleep is the daily microcosm of the latter. Governance of the physical loosens, the dream body rehearses astral release, deep sleep brushes mental thresholds. Safe trance imitates higher deaths with a tether. Unsafe trance tears the envelope and lets stereotypes flood in. Each rung has a diagnostic. Do physical attachments resolve or metastasize as compulsions? Does vitality reorganize without leaks? Can desire quiet without rebound? Can you drop a cherished concept on command? Can you stop worshiping your own abstractions? Can you love a group without dissolving into it? Does silence increase usefulness rather than isolation? If the answer trends to yes, you are dying well, freeing force and widening reciprocity without losing self. Work the ladder by symmetry. Build from above downward. Channel first in the subtler plane, effect in the denser, then plan to shed from below upward when the cycle calls time. Before any deliberate release, verify phase against the sky clock, balance polarities so rebound does not whip you, ensure the higher vehicle is awake to receive the transfer, and seal the relinquished shell into planetary custody by explicit intention. No loose ends for scavengers. The ethical geometry is simple and severe. A death is successful only if it enlarges freedom in relation, more exchange with group mind without loss of edge, more service to planetary work without capture. Every shell you shed re-enters the planet's strata, which is how atavistic fields reform so quickly and why discipline is civic as well as private. Keep that in view, and the skull on the altar stops being Gothic decor. It is a map. 7 clean exits taken in order, each one turning a prison into a tool and a memory into law. Impactation is transmission with teeth. You bring a subtler plane force through to a denser plane by locking 2 complementaries at the boundary until the dense takes imprint. Picture the inverted A, 2 impactors converging from above, the plane line as the bar, the projection below as the open triangle, and then do the crucial thing most operators skip, include the bar of impactation in the projected aspect so the triangle closes. Now the creators can detach on their own plane while the dense framework retains a stress system that remembers what hit it. This is how an atom is made from tangentials. This is how a ritual fathers a form. This is how a master reaches a pupil along prolongation lines, the subtle angles extended into the dense so consciousness of the type of the impactors can contact and govern. The dynamic standard of good and evil arrives here with surgical clarity. Advance form rightly by impactation when evolution requires embodiment, or degrade power by shoving it downward against phase and polarity. Either way, the universe pays in exact coin. Polarity is the engine. Mapping is half the work. Union reads horizontal, fissure vertical. Plane by plane polarity inverts, and a one-plane contact tends to repulsion, while a multiplane figure eight builds a living circuit. Lay the cross on the hexagon on the caduceus, and you have a working divination of angles, quarters, and the bar. Group consciousness is negative until a positive subtler plane stimulus fertilizes it. Then each member conceives and brings work to birth. Individually, you can repolarize, make personality negative, individuality positive, and create minor forms, but they will not live alone. You must feed them, or they starve and foul the tank. 2 births are worth knowing: ordinary birth in the course of nature, and hieratic birth, where a loftier grade soul manifests with the assistance of another of similar grade, one pressing to the circumference, the partner returning to the center. Raise consciousness, and the hexagram of initiation stands up in the air like a signpost. Method, or do not touch it. Identify the 2 complementaries you will lock at the boundary. Diagram the inverted A and mark the bar. Confirm polarity on each plane. Remember the inversion. Choose the partner or group channel that can actually hold the angle. Complete the triangle in the dents. Detach cleanly and govern through the prolongation lines you laid. Read both sides of every problem, because construction above entails destruction below. All things die to the birth. Use impactation when the cosmos is inbreathing that quarter and form must be advanced. Use sublimation when evolution is exhaling and densest matter needs separating from grossness. Get the law stack wrong. Attraction of the center, attraction of the circumference, polarity, and leakage is assured. The triangle fails, and you will call it mystery while sweeping up debris. Get it right, and the subtle descends without loss and rises again without rupture, which is all the art wants: a clean conduit, sealed at both ends, running on time. Polarity is the two-faced engine of every operation, center pulling in, circumference pulling out, and you cannot speak it without naming both gravities. On one plane, a force is positive, climb a level and its face flips. That is why a method that sang yesterday bites today. You changed altitude and did not invert the wiring. Horizontal polarity means 2 of a kind, opposite in type on the same level. Vertical polarity is correspondence across planes. Lay the cross on the hexagon on the caduceus. The crossbar is your bar of impactation. The star sits with its basal point on the densest plane. The twin serpents climb the ray. Now you have a map that tells you where to lock, where to cross, and where to let go. Single plane unions magnetize, then repel. They flash and fail. Multiplane contact builds an alternating figure 8 that circulates charge and actually lasts. 1 resolves to 2 before it can beget 3. Projection to subtler planes until the dual shows and a living third can be born. Groups obey the same physics. A group consciousness is negative until a positive subtler plane stimulus fertilizes it. Then each member conceives and brings work to birth. After conception, leader and group share polarity and fresh stimulus ceases. Hence cycles, blaze, plateau, fade. To renew, you must change plane or change partner. Otherwise, you flog a circuit that has already spent its difference. Individuals can cheat a little by repolarizing. Make personality negative, individuality positive, and you can cast minor forms. They are powerful but hungry. They cannot live alone and will eat the parent if fed too long. Inverse the skew, intensify personality while inhibiting individuality, and you get the mundane genius that burns bright and short, a rocket that mistakes thrust for orbit. None of this is moralism, it is traffic control. Specify the planes of contact for any alliance, school, or project. If it lives on one level only, plan for repulsion. If you need endurance, build at least a 2-plane figure 8 and include the bar that closes the triangle in the dents. Strategy is geometry with a clock. Name the center and circumference pulls in play. Mark the levels so you remember inversion. Decide whether the move is horizontal or vertical and design for 4 quarters. Then superimpose the caduceus, the Orphic staff of stress points, and the inverted A of impactation to trace prolongation lines. Those lines are how a master reaches a pupil. The angle embodied at creation becomes a road for consciousness of the type of the impactors. To travel, use them on purpose or they will be used on you. If contact is only on one plane, unite briefly, separate cleanly, and leave no hooks. If cross-plane, alternate by schedule so the circuit breathes. Polarity is not a mood to feel, it is a tool to wield. Handle it with numbers, angles, and timing, and it will push your work like a tide. Handle it with vibes, and it will throw you against your own rocks. Outer space is the lure of unconditioned power beyond the ring past not, the voice that whispers skip the dues and take the crown. 3 engines drive that seduction. The logos itself pushes new growing points outward once one conception is perfected. Pressures inside the system seek equilibrium by bleeding into the apparent vacuum, and along the inner shell of the ring accumulates a penumbra of falsified hopes, abortive forms and rejected molds that mirror your unworked cravings back at you like neon promises. At the nadir, you look across the gulf and the phantoms mouth your own desires. Be free of law, be God without apprenticeship, be pure will. 2 futures split there. Transcend by perfect obedience and you seed a new sun. Break before mastery and you become unconditioned will. The clean archetype of evil, power without relation, appetite without ring. The lesson is brutal. The gulf does not liberate your chains, it multiplies them. Timing decides who lives to brag. The safe turn happens when the cosmic tide is itself turning. Cross at the change of current and the field carries you. Rush it and lines revert or snap. Retrovert before the nadir and you have taken the left hand by fear. Buck the stream after the nadir and you take it by pride. What calls from beyond is not treasure but trash. Rejected patterns craving for force that resonate with any kin element you still shelter. Feed them and they breed you into their image. The right response at bottom is dull and heroic. Stabilize equilibrium inside the ring. Let forms stereotype cleanly, then withdraw bearing the reaction capacity you have earned. Freedom is not an outlaw leap. It is balanced return. This is why comet lore matters in the doctrine. There are scavengers in the sky, errand bodies that cart ruined units out beyond all influence to the unknown death. That is the end state of living on free play as if it were law. Treat outer space as a datum to navigate, not a destination to worship. When the lure spikes, check phase against the sky clock, confirm your ring pass not, and route the surge back into synthesis, into study, service, or initiation, so the pressure becomes leverage instead of rupture. In human terms, you will know the penumbra by its marketing. Projects that preach power without discipline, shortcuts that bypass initiation, aesthetics that glamorize regression and call it primal truth. The fix is procedural. Hold the metronome. Name the temptation in the language of your craft. Bind it to a schedule you can keep. If you have not consummated law, you do not cross. You deepen obedience until obedience becomes freedom. Then, and only then, does the center open the gate and the leap becomes a birth rather than a fall. We turn next to that counter law, the attraction of the center, the pull that gathers, integrates, initiates, and returns you home with everything outer space tried to sell you stolen. The attraction of the center is the law that gathers, integrates, initiates, the quiet gravity behind every real advance. At maximal complexity, progress flips from adding parts to synthesizing levels. Idea impressed into etheric mold, circulation-informed matter laying magnetic stresses, then the dense vehicle dropped while the subtle framework persists as a conceptive idea. That is unification, not simplification. The center does not sit in space. It extends as syntheses occur. When the pull grows strong, a day of manifestation is fading, During the cosmic night, outflow from the center recasts plane substance, scrubs stereotypes, relaxes inertia. True signs of center attraction are unmistakable. Increasing synthesis, dense shells shed only after the stress systems are secured, reciprocity deepening without loss of edge. If what you call return shows up as parasitism, obsession, borrowed shells, or a hunger to short-circuit method, that is not the center. It is the penumbra wearing a stole. Initiation is the center's protocol made personal. Those who have returned become initiators, forerunners of the shadow of the spirit, each plane's openers being the ripened fruits of the previous evolution there. Presently, the greater illuminations occur out of the body, because the waters of regeneration have not yet saturated the physical stratum. Candidates pass from surface to substratum by their action, and only when those waters percolate can full initiation happen in that plane. Read the mechanics cleanly. The right-hand return withdraws perfected life, synthesizes principles, sublimates them into ideals, and realizes those ideals by cosmic consciousness. The left-hand misuse drifts centerward too soon, hauling life through planes already vacated by the wave. It borrows empty etheric shells, impedes evolution, and ultimately dissolves when the stock of shells is gone. Real attraction of the center raises integration. Premature pull strips vehicles and leaves a hungry will in a corridor with no doors. Work with the law by geometry and tide. Map center and circumference pulls, then choose movement that increases integration at the next level, rather than merely pruning complexity on the old one. Do not cross in a blind quarter. Time approach to tide turns, so the night can cleanse molds and the day can build on the clean. Build outward from the center by impactation when embodiment is commanded. Return by sublimation when synthesis is ripe. In culture, spot the center by the effects, fewer moving parts, more capability. Ideals that become tools, communities that intensify freedom in relation. Reject the counterfeit, programs that promise purity by subtraction, awakenings that depend on borrowed shells, gurus who confuse simplification with unification. The center draws without drama. You will know you are inside its field when dropping weight increases reach and silence makes you more useful. Hold there, and the ring that once bound you becomes a lens. Look through it, and the way home is already under your feet. You made it through the labyrinth, rings, rays, Lord's laws. No incense, no velvet, just working physics for souls. Here's the one-line keepsake. Evolution is memory learning to move. Initiation is movement learning to mean, and love is the center's gravity teaching both to aim. If any part of this hit a live wire in you, that is not romance. It is a system recognizing itself. Hold that recognition like a compass you do not put down, even when the weather screams otherwise. From here, the work is timing and tools. Draw the ring, set the channel, climb the ladder of deaths on schedule, and when the penumbra howls for shortcuts, smile and tighten your laces. If you want a next step, pick one field in your life and run the audit. Latencies, actualities, potentialities. Name the plane, build the vehicle one level up, and schedule a small, clean sublimation this week. Not someday. Now means now, or the groove you dislike will happily deepen by default. I am not promising safety. Power is a terrible neighbor when you are sloppy. But if you keep phase with the sky clock and respect polarity like electricity, things begin to cohere. You will feel the click when dropping weight increases reach, when silence carries more leverage than argument, when a group stops being a crowd and becomes a conductor. That is the center taking purchase. Do not celebrate it, use it. Push one thing across a plane boundary without leakage, and let the result teach you the second move. Tell me what broke open for you. Was it the 7 deaths as a humane staircase instead of dread, the shock of outer space rebranded as a mirage, or the blunt arithmetic of action and reaction scaling by subplanes? Drop your take in the comments and challenge each other with real cases. Which law saved you time? Which one exposed your favorite excuse? If you want me to map your scenario against the table of influences, I will do it live in the next episode. No mystique, just gears. If this served you, hit like so the algorithm. The dumbest planetary spirit of them all learns a better rhythm. Subscribe if you want the next field manual on your desk the second it lands. Share this with the one friend who is done with vibes and ready for vectors. Thank you for staying sharp till the end. I will be here, same engine, new rings, when you are ready to run the next experiment.